welcome to our last town hall of the academic year. We made it. That's really great. If you remember where we were in September and how we were feeling about things, we made it. We made it really well. So I think we should all be very happy and proud of ourselves for that. I'm very happy to welcome the provost to our meeting today. And so I will just step aside and let you have time with the provost. So Dr. Thoreau.
Thanks. So I'm just here. You can let it rip. It's Friday the 13th. Very excited about that. I am excited that we are right towards the end here. 2 more class days left, and then finals. And then so exciting time of the year. All kinds of cool events. Grub Street is 6 o'clock today. So I'm a huge fan of Grub Street, and I know many of you are too. So it's a free for all. So questions, whatever you want, I'm here to answer, or at least try to answer. All right. Good morning. Everybody go.
I don't know who's monitoring Zoom and any questions we might get that way.
Zoom over there.
I have Zoom.
Okay, and I know a few questions were submitted in advance, but I would prefer people who are here right now to ask, and then we'll go to the ones submitted. So who's going to be the first one?
I'll be first.
Perfect.
So I wrote them down just to make sure. So what is the rationale for applying a one-size-fits-all across all departments? Meaning, why is everybody getting a 3-3-30 advisee? And how is that supposed to create incentives for more research?
So the rationale, the premise is not accurate. So as we've said repeatedly, that the 3-3 is for faculty who are taking on a more research intensive approach to their teaching load. Faculty have the complete right to stay at 4-3. We've talked about how many people would say, look, I was hired at a less research intensive university. I didn't come here to do that. I came here to focus more on teaching, and that is perfectly appropriate and fine. So faculty may select that option. So that's just a conversation between individual faculty and their department chairs. So there's zero compulsion for everybody to go to a 3-3.
What if you're already on the 3-3 and 50 advisees? Then going to 3 and 3 and
so
30.
There's the only scenario where you should have 50 advisees has not equitably divided up your advisees. And there's one exception, and that's the psychology department. And so other than that, there should be, I've looked at the number of majors and the number of full-time faculty, and the math indicates that an equitable distribution of advisees, we ought to be able to get everybody down to the correct load. So your advisees at 3-3 because you have 50 advisees. Under this system, your advisee number will go down, and then that is what frees up your time.
So for those that have 50 plus advisees at the moment, what is the plan to get us down to 30? Is it just to more equitably distribute advisees across faculty?
Correct. Yes. And so again, there are a few departments around campus. So in CLA, psychology is the one for sure that needs some people doing full-time advising. And my understanding is that are people that are doing that, but I'm not 100% sure how it's worked out. But so in the cases where there are departments that the math just literally doesn't work out, what a lot of departments do, they hire a lecturer. That person, that is their full-time gig, is to do the advisory. So then you take on obviously a more significant role. Yeah,
I'm psychology.
The giant department.
Yes. So
yes.
Curious how this is actually going to work, because if you're dividing students across faculty, our faculty are still getting assigned advisees. So even though we have a slightly different way that we do it in the department, most of our faculty still have assigned advisees, and we just have a team, a smaller group that kind of takes on some of the more clerical responsibilities associated with advising. And so our numbers are still, upwards of 50, 60, 70 advisees, even though we also have an advising team. So I'm just curious, like how you sort of envision.
So I don't quite get that. So the clerical, I don't understand.
Like,
what is that?
Like working with students to advise them on course registration and removing advising holds and completing degree completion plans and then our regular advisors do that as well if students come to them, because the students are assigned to them through PeopleSoft.
Are that former group also assigned straight up advisors?
They have the same loads as all of the other faculty.
Therein lies the problem. So by National Advising NACADA, whatever the heck it stands for, typically a professional advisor whose full-time job is advising should have about 400 advisees. I think that's a crazy number. So, but I think somewhere between 200 and 250 is absolutely an appropriate number for somebody whose job it is to advise.
But they're only getting one. They're regular faculty.
Right. So
right.
So no. So if you're a regular faculty, you do this. But don't you have? My understanding was psychology had one or two people who are in our system as lecturers, but the majority of their job is advising.
No.
Well, then we should correct that, right? Because clearly, so that's what other departments have done. And so my mistake for thinking that psychology was doing that. So that's what we need to do, because there's no way you can advise that many advisees. Like, I totally get it. And so that's something that we should all sit down and work our way through. It's an inappropriate number of advisees. It's not good for you. It's not good for the students. Sure. Yes.
I have a question about advising. This is, we're just 2 semesters past being, remote and everything else, I understand. But in the past, if you had advisees, there would be periods of time when they would be having an advising hold, but not every semester. And this semester, it seems like every student had a hold, including graduating students who really were upset about the hold, thinking they were not going to graduate. I'm wondering if there's any thought of going back to the there's articulation points when you need advising hold, otherwise you don't that year.
So I don't know why the graduating seniors would have had a hold. That's some weird mechanical thing that we can look at to fix. But we did return to every semester, every student gets advised. And so that was my call based on lots of research. I found that the system here was pretty complicated. Like, if you have X number of credits, yes, you have to come in, and then no, you don't. And then suddenly again, based on this credits, you come in. There was not a heck of a lot of rationale around it. And so the research is really, really clear and consistent that the more advising, the better. Now, as we've talked about, advising itself comes in many forms and shapes, and that can and should be determined by the faculty. So oftentimes what you'll see is, first year students, their advising is pretty much, it's like a lot of course scheduling, there's a lot of rote stuff, there's not a lot of choice. And so oftentimes a successful strategy there is group advising, right? You can get 100 first year students in a room and you go, y'all, you have to, everybody next first semester takes these things. You can do peer advising with that level of student. That's super effective. And then as students get more advanced, the advising changes. We all know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that later it becomes more of a mentoring relationship. And then certainly with seniors, the discussion changes from what the heck am I going to do in class to what the heck am I going to do with my life? And I mean, hopefully those discussions happened earlier too. But so it changes. And so I encourage departments to discuss, and I do think it's also discipline specific. What makes sense for your discipline? And so you can come up with all kinds of different solutions to this that put less of a burden on faculty so that there isn't, look, I know there's no way to individually meet with like 60 students. That's insane. You just cannot do it. And so if that's what's happening, let's put our collective heads together and look at some other strategies that have been proven elsewhere to be effective so that it frees up where there is that valuable mentoring time is kind of that junior and senior level student. But you can take those freshmen and sophomores in particular and do a lot more group and peer advising that's proven to be really, really successful. So those are things you all can work together to figure out what works best. I mean, I'm happy to support, I'm happy to learn things like psychology really is. I mean, that's honestly, that's news to me, and I was completely under the impression that you had 1 or 2 lectures that just did that. So we'll get that fixed. Okay. So what else?
I know that a lot of the emphasis in going to R2 is on getting grants. And this is a college of liberal arts. We're not going to get grants like the sciences, like they need a telescope that's $100,000 or whatever. You're an historian, right? You know that there's no $100,000 grants out there for studying history or almost anything that we do. Rather, the metrics for us are time, right? Maybe traveling, but not everyone needs to do traveling. So I think number of grant dollars is not a good measure for us for productivity.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it depends on your discipline, right? So I would say psychology probably has far more. You're looking at a historian who won an $860,000 grant, so so they are out there. But you're 100% right. So how we measure it is not just you guys. I mean, how many grants are there for cello majors? I mean, there's just not a lot. And so that's why we've been really clear about this, is that there's no central measure, certainly that the provost office is going to use or the dean's office is going to use, that we say all faculty have to be grant active. That's just, it's completely inappropriate in some fields, right? And so what's appropriate for your field is what is appropriate for this sort of move to R2, right? And so most of the, or many, if not most of the departments here, my expectation would be articles, it's books, right? I would expect far less grant writing out of here, but that doesn't mean none, right? So grants, and I know psychology's done a bunch, and so it is very, there's slices, but yeah, I got that big old grant, but I'll tell you what, it was one of those random things that there was, Lynn Cheney got all worked up that we should do some patriotic teaching of civics in high schools, and so we wrote a big old grant and got it. But those are rare, and I understand that. I do this story too. Do a lot of grant writing.
The thing is,
I would say more of it is collaborative group grants rather than group projects rather than individual grants, but we have both going on for sure.
Yeah, but I know it's very, all of these things are discipline specific. Again, just returning to our cello professor, I don't think they write articles, maybe they do. I honestly don't know. I would be very poorly situated to judge whether that cellist was doing appropriate work. But you know who's really situated well? The chair and the dean. And so that's what I rely on, and those are the conversations that have to happen. I will tell, there's almost no scenario that I can think of where a chair and a faculty member work out, here's what the research expectations are. I can't really imagine a scenario where the provost, or it'd be appropriate for a provost to come in and question that. Unless it literally said, you're gonna do no research whatsoever or something like that. It really is appropriate at that level. The provost office has no business going in, and I have no intention to. I wouldn't know what to do. And so, we trust colleagues. Our work is based on so much collegiality. Unlike, that's what makes working at a university different from working at a factory, right? It's shared governance, it's collegiality, it's coming together to figure out what makes sense for your discipline, not me going, and you're gonna crank 12 grants out of it. There are no grants in English or whatever. So you all work together to figure it out. And unless it's completely absurd, there's no effort to referee at my level. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that, but all the signals to this point have been about grants. So I'm glad to hear that clarification.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been trying to run around. I mean, maybe, you know, sometimes whatever, you know, things take on a life of their own. But we've certainly been trying to message out to everybody that it's discipline specific. We totally get it, and that again, this is faculty. It's a conversation between faculty and chairs and deans, and having that conversation rather than anything. I mean, I'd be thrilled if grant dollars went up there. It's important, but there's zero expectation that every faculty member is involved in grants. I mean, biologists don't write books for the most part, right? And so it would be weird if I said, well, I expect 12 books out of the biology department. That there's different disciplines.
Yes, I have a question, moving a little bit outside of just talking about grants, about the R2 transition. And that I would like to hear about perspectives for the development of graduate studies, since this seems to be also an important thing. And it is a kind of development that requires a lot of planning, and planning that sometimes, you know, can take quite significant amount of time.
Sure.
And I seem to understand that we were sort of limited a little bit on the kind of work that we could do in that regard. So,
limited in what way?
In terms of our placement in the system of Maryland overall.
I think I understand. So in terms of like proposing new graduate programs and the hurdles there, yeah, so there's multiple hurdles when you ever propose a new graduate or undergraduate program, but in all honesty, most new undergraduate programs, people don't care too much about because they don't. Graduate programs they care a lot about because that is competitive and there's a limited market and so forth. And so whenever a new graduate program or any program is proposed, it goes out to the system. So a letter of intent goes out. Everybody gets to comment, and if you have one that if you think this competes with your program, you can raise your hand and say, look, this duplicates our program, and so we object. And that can be any college or university in the entire state of Maryland. So the first run is just through the system, and then the second run goes through all of the colleges. So Notre Dame can protest us. And so what we have to do is when faculty are interested in creating a new program, that's our very first question. And so let me tell you that one thing that I really encourage people to do is that we'll do that work for you. So that's a labor-intensive work. Don't feel like you have to do it, because some of the proposals we get, people are they're doing all the work. I mean, if you want to, you knock yourself out, but our office, that's part of their job. So what we have to do is we do a quick look for duplication. And then the second thing you have to do is a labor market study. And again, we will do that for you. You don't have to do that. Those two things have to be kind of approved at the state before anything goes forward. So those are the kind of the state limitations, sort of duplication and proof that there's actually a market, that the graduates are going to get a job somewhere. So where we are with sort of that connection to R2, remember that the chief measure where we're lacking right now is production of research PhDs, research doctoral students, right? So we are proposing an increase in the number of those degrees. And so looking at adding, not a huge number, maybe 3 or 4 of these. And also getting approved to offer a PhD degree rather than these strange doctoral degrees that we've been forced to offer to this point. And so that's moving forward, and we hope and expect to be allowed to offer the PhD as a degree in the fall. So some of these other program proposals are in the very early stages. A PhD in sustainability is our first one that's been fully put together and proposed out to the system. And so we have another business analytics, I believe, some title in that range. We're looking at something in the autism area because we have a lot of strengths in that field. And then there's a couple other that are bouncing about. So those are the ones we're thinking of going forward with right now. But if faculty are interested, in creating new doctoral or master's programs, right? First conversation is over with the graduate office, and we'll do that work for you so you don't do a ton of work only to find out, Morgan has that exact program and there's no way we'll get it through because they do. So let us do the annoying part for you, and then you can focus on the more interesting parts.
I have a question, and it's not a bad question. So in terms of like for grants, I understand people don't want to go after grants. And that's fine. Like,
yeah, in some fields it's just far fewer.
I mean, but criminal justice, there's millions worth of money to be had.
Yep.
But I do think that the problem there is the fact that OSPR is unaware. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think people are informed about where to go get grants.
Yeah.
And so I think that is one of the biggest impediments, because unless a faculty member knows where to go.
Right. And
so I think that, and for CLA, there's plenty of money to get grants. It's just does the person want to? I mean, the return on investment is low,
right?
Right? I mean, it is, unless you want to leave or unless you want to have a better, But at the same time, like our field, Ashley's and I, criminal justice has so much money, and I also think, and this is something you've already talked about, creating a database of people that are interested in going after grants, so that we can cross collaborate.
Yeah.
Because poli-sci and crim-j, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of stuff to do.
There are, I agree with you that there's a lot of really interesting interdisciplinary things where you're seeing more and more of those things, and like really strange things. So when at the peak of COVID, history grant, they're under COVID, right? Under NIH, and historians were getting NIH grants, which is bizarre. Like it would never have occurred to me as a historian to even look at the NIH for a grant, but they existed. And so you're right that, so part of this is we gotta get Oscar, getting out there and being a little more proactive, working with Facet to help create more of this kind of community of practice for faculty oriented. But again, bottom line is if this is not something you're interested in, there's no compulsion to do it. It is, some people like it and are really good at it, and some people don't. And it's just a different skill set too. I'll tell you, the first grant I ever wrote, I wrote it like a historian, and I brought it over to the grants office. They're like, "Yeah, Melanie, no." Right? The language was quite florid, and I just thought it was beautiful. And they're like, "No." And so you learn, it's a different writing skill. The whole thing's different. But people who are interested, I think working together with the easiest way is to do it with another faculty member first, if you've never done one, and then you kind of start to understand how to write these things. And they are just, it's a different kind of writing for most people. Yes.
Okay, so in the transition to R2, is any thought given to what's happening in the classroom and with students in the classroom? And because my sense, there has been a huge change since COVID, and perhaps a different applicant pool or whatever. But that's the part that I'm really frustrated in, is I see serious problems in the classroom. I asked the administration for direction. I've heard, there really hasn't been a change. They just can't take tests. And I've been teaching for over 20 years. So it's like, I can see it. I can, to the point, like, do we give up on reading? Like when I came here, it was thought that students read about 120 pages per week for your class. That's completely, I don't see that as a realistic goal with the students that I have. I'm even wondering if we're giving up on reading. Am I being too hard? So is there any correlation between that? Because I feel like there are more issues with our students in the classroom now. And if you go into R2, you'd think you'd want a better student body.
So I think if you talk to your colleagues at R2 and R1 universities, you're gonna hear the same thing, right? That students are struggling. They aren't doing well on exams. They certainly aren't doing well on paper writing and all this. Like, this is not unique to Towson, and it's not unique to our level of a university. I don't know, when you say the administration said nothing changed, I don't know who you're talking about or what you're talking about. Who's the administration who told you that?
It was the president who said, basically, there wasn't a big change. Because I've been following this issue. You can ask my chair. I've been dogging her all the time about this particular issue.
Yeah, so I wasn't in on that discussion, but
I'll tell you back what the feedback was the fact there really hasn't been a change. Maybe they can't take tests as well. There's some indication that they can't. And and that like somehow that's a horrible pedagogy, so we should never do testing. I mean, that wasn't said, but I do other things besides tests.
Sure.
But I also, you know, believe like you're reading and then testing on the reading, and that is, I have no success in getting the majority of students reading anymore. To the point like I'm wondering, you know, am I being unrealistic to think about 125 pages a week? I think I am, but I'm not getting any support to cut it down. I mean, not from my chair. My chair's great, so that's not it.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things in it. So I can't speak to the president, obviously, and I wasn't in the conversation, so I don't know what it was, but I've been in the classroom, she hasn't been in the classroom. What hasn't changed is the admission standards, and what we were very surprised to see is that the DWF rate barely moved, hardly at all. And so when we say that, is that the measure what's having impact? Absolutely not. But that's the only measure that we can look at as administrators who aren't in the classroom. But I have no doubt that what you're saying is accurate, because that's what we're hearing from everybody, and that's what we're hearing across the country. And you think about it, of course, the students we're getting right now for the next 2 to 3 years had their junior and senior or sophomore year of high school blow up, completely blow up. They didn't read 100, you know, they probably didn't read 20 pages a week. If they took a test, odds are they had a book open next to them or another computer screen, and were looking up answers as they took the test. When they had a discussion, their cameras were off, right? That was their junior, senior, sophomore year in high school. And so I would certainly expect that there would be difficulties for those students. And that makes it super hard for faculty. I get it. And so I don't have a solution to how to make them read. But one of the things I guess I would just suggest is when we have these sorts of things, the best person to turn to is certainly not me or the president. The best person to turn to are the people in this room and to talk to each other, because I'm willing to bet that somebody in this room has figured out a technique that worked really well in their class. And it might not work really well in your class, it might not translate, but having those conversations with each other, or maybe not, maybe they're all great, maybe not. And then at the very least, then you can at least commiserate together, right? But having those conversations and you know, kind of working through some of those things and thinking about, you know, how might we have to change? How might we, you know, again, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. You're the experts. You're the ones that are facing it and can think about it creatively. But I certainly would have expected and do expect that we're going to have different students coming in for 3, 4, 5 years. Ideally, then it starts to correct itself. But you know, the learning was suspect for 2 years. It was. But that doesn't mean we give up and lower our standards. It means we think about how we get there. And it's, again, that's the creativity of faculty to figure out what that is. And it's nothing I can dictate for sure. Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on that idea a little bit because, so I teach first-year students and writing, and you know, I've had students say, "Oh, we haven't had any writing assigned for the last 2 years of high school," right? So that's the kind of problem we have. But in terms of my workload, it's dramatically increased. My teaching workload has dramatically increased.
Because the students are less prepared, you think, or what? What's the?
They're not only less prepared, but they're also suffering all sorts of stressors in their life. You know, students are still going to funerals, losing people, and you know, life intervenes.
Sure.
And frankly, we're suffering those things as well.
Yeah.
So given that and in terms of advising, just even informal advising, it's a huge time sink right now. As you know, I talk to a dozen students a week about, you know, their best friend just committed suicide, or you name it, right? So in terms of my workload, teaching and advising is taking up much more time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, how has the administration thought about that relative to a push to get us to produce more scholarship with a move to an R2? And second part of the question would be, what are you doing to support us?
So lots of things. So first of all, again, reiterate, you can choose or not choose to take the more research intensive path. It's a choice, 100% up to you. So you can choose, and it's a valid choice, and it's a choice I support, and I've said repeatedly, and I'll say it till the day I die. That a faculty member who chooses that path to stay on the more teaching intensive is just as valuable, just as important, and just as good of faculty members, and when it becomes more research intensive. They are critical to the mission, and they're important, and always have been. So if people can choose it. So to get to an R2 status, just to remind everyone, it's literally a nudge. In 2016, had we spent $1.5 million more on research, we would be an R2 university today. That's how small the change is. And so I just need to constantly talk to people. I think people still have an R1 in their mind. Please do not have an R1 in your mind. Chairs sitting down with faculty, we're not an R1. We are taking 12.5% of your teaching load off. I just ran the math. So 12.5%. Maybe I did it wrong even. Because I did it in my head. I might not have carried the one. But it's somewhere in that range. And 12.5% of 60%. Who's a math person?
Say again?
What's 12.5% of 60%?
Jesus.
So somewhere in like the 7 or 8% range, ballpark. That's the change. The change. And so what we're talking about here is a nudge, right? It's really a nudge. And please don't think that suddenly we're going to be an R1 where, if by God, you don't have 2 books done by the time you're if 2 books at top presses and 6 articles, you're not going to get tenure. That is not Towson University, and that's not an R2. That's not. If you do that, more power to you. That's great. There are people who pull that off. That's not the expectation. So this is a nudge. It's a small move forward. We're only reducing 1 class, everybody. So that expectation isn't giant. So what are we doing besides reducing the class to 3-3? And by the way, some people will be on a 2-2. Some people might be on a 1-1 for a particular semester because we have variable teaching loads now. We're allowed to do that finally. And so there may be that opportunity, not in perpetuity, right? But if you have a super intense, hey, listen, I've got this book contract with Harvard University Press, and the due date is May 10th, and it's December or whatever. That's a conversation you can have with the department chair to see, could I go with them? Could I just teach 2 next semester, right? And so those are the conversations we can have. So that's answer number 1. But answer number 2 is like in terms of the other support. So we've more than doubled financial support for faculty research. So that number, the faculty grant number doubled. Undergraduate research support more than doubled. Our support for research assistants at the graduate level skyrocketed. So we went from, we have research assistants. First of all, we didn't have research assistants, we had GAs. We've authorized research assistants. And those research assistants in the doctoral programs are getting $35,000 stipends and full benefits. We compete with UMBC and College Park for those students now. So these are all the supports that have been put into place to make these nudges. And so I think there's a lot of support. We're going to increase the number of people over in Osper when we get the opportunity to do so. Bassett has support to help people on the research side. So there's all kinds of supports that are being built in there. And so, I would really encourage people that, I think we might have even more than doubled the research support for faculty. there's a lot of opportunity there to go and get seed money to do, hey, I have a 3-3 load, but I'd really like a 2-2 load. I can go get this seed money, course buyout with my chair, and do things like that. So there's ways to get there. I need to go to this place, but I burned all my travel money. Archive. Well, there's more research money in the pot now, significantly more. So those are some of the things that we've done.
Do not.
I have a question. So,
yeah.
And because Jennifer and I talk about this nearly every Friday. So we have our little writing support bitch group.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and I you're absolutely right with, but there's a lot of assumptions and gatekeeping that I think, I put together 3 grants. I'm gonna still be on my 3, 3, and 30 advisees. And just for the record, my department has more 50 per person. So if we go down to 30, we're gonna end up with advisees without an advisor. And so the question is like, because Jennifer teaches writing, which means it's a lot of grading, it's a lot of, and so that won't free up any research activities if she's on a 3-3, because the course itself that she teaches is very labor intensive. And I'm speaking for myself and maybe some other in my department. I teach methods and theories. Those are upper level writing intensive. So the question when I asked about, and I didn't mean it to come out like bitchy, but when I asked about the 3-3-30, the type of class you teach is also relevant, because if all you do is teach methods and theories and upper levels.
Yeah, but so I would argue that then the course release is actually even more valuable, because the course, if you're teaching an intensive class where it does take more time, then getting out of one of those should
not. But we're not getting out of those.
You're reduced it for the people that teach 50 advisees right now. That's our course release. We're on a 3-3 with at least 50 advisees at the moment.
Well, I'm saying
if you're bringing us down to 30, that's 20 advisees.
Yes. It makes no difference.
A year. That's not that much of a difference, especially if all of those 30 still have an advising hold every semester. That's more work than we were doing advising than 2 years ago. Still. So how are we doing less work, even though the expectations for advising are still more than when I started here? So I still have less time for research than 3-4 years ago.
And I agree, because if you're a good advisor and you do, because we meet with all 50 when we do advising. Sure. So if you meet with all 50, reducing it to 30 and still having a 3-3 and teaching theories and methods and upper levels, it's not going to give us a lot more time for research.
Look,
I mean,
we're not talking about a dramatic shift in the research expectations. We are talking about a little bit. And so, and again, you can choose or not choose to do that. And so you can continue how you want. I've had a 4-4 load for the vast majority of my teaching career. I have 30 to 35 advisees for the vast majority of that time. I taught the research methods course. I'm a historian. Every last exam I taught was essay, every single one, right? And I had papers. And so I sympathize. I understand that that it is tiring, right? And so what you need to be able to do is to talk to each other, talk to your chairs, talk to your dean, have these conversations and say, hey, look, there's an issue here. I'm teaching this research intensive class. I always teach this research intensive class. You need me to teach this research intensive class. I want to do this big grant. Let's talk about a 2-2 for the duration of this, right? While I'm doing this thing. And then when that thing is done, we might go back to 3-3. So I would highly encourage everybody to have these discussions, right, with each other, have that flexibility. Again, I am not the person who should do that. But if there's a dispute and people are, hey, look, I think I should get this, and the chair says I should get that, your first stop is the dean, and the dean stop is to the provost. But my hope and expectation is that the vast majority of these things will be settled and understood at the department level. And then just one last piece of this, the one last thing I think that's gonna be really important for us all to do is to that decision needs to be made transparent. And so that when you don't, what we don't want it to appear to be is side deals that this person got because they're buddies with the chair, right? Those can be poison pills. And so this is it's simple to do. You can literally at and there's multiple ways to do it. At a department meeting, the announcement is, here's what we're doing. Everybody's working. This is the workloads, and because Professor X is working on this grant, they're going to be teaching at 2-3. And the thing is, we have to be good colleagues. This is elevating the good colleague need, right? So that coming out with knives sharpened for your colleague who's working on this big grant, or who's writing this article, and who's doing this thing. If departments start doing that and come to at each other with knives sharpened, then this whole experiment is going to fail, and then we're back to, all right, everybody, I guess what we're going to do is a 4-3 for everybody. I don't think that's what we want. I think we want to have that flexibility. I think we want to have that. I think we want to have departments make these decisions rather than me. And so I just caution people and urge people to say, come at that, not with the point of going after each other, not with the, well, they're putting one over on the chair, so that sort of thing. And that just that requires transparency, collegiality, and just sort of understand, setting aside of egos, and then again understanding that course release does not equal you're a better professor. That's where we get problems. I got 4 course releases, so therefore I'm a better faculty member. It's untrue. It's completely untrue. I was a darn good faculty member with a 4-4 load, right? And so we have to take that out of the equation, and it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, another aspect of resources that research-intensive universities have is teaching assistants. I know that we were talking about increasing or shifting, if you will, some from graduate assistants to research, but teaching assistants also, and that also has an implication for getting good people into higher level, say PhD programs and the such. Because if you don't have the opportunity to teach as a PhD,
right,
then you don't become competitive when you go out on the job market for a job.
For sure.
Is there any chance that there's going to be an increase in that?
So I think likely if and when we get PhDs that fall in like liberal arts or co-fac or things like that, there would be likely some teaching assistant positions that go with it. Because again, that's for these disciplines for the most part. Again, psychology probably aside, and maybe a couple others here and there, maybe criminal justice. Your best use of PhD students is as teaching assistants rather than research. I mean, as a historian, I'm not sending my grad student off to do research for me, and I imagine that's true for many of the disciplines here. So yes, I would expect that if a doctoral program arises, that's in some of these fields, that would be appropriate. We're never going to go to, by the way, the 300 lecture and 10 TAs. No. That's not Towson. We're not going there. No way. That's not the university I signed up for, and I know that's not the one you all signed up for. But a handful of these more designed to assist that PhD student in getting that next job and getting that experience, I think would certainly be appropriate.
But it also has an impact on the teaching load, in the sense that with teaching assistants, I mean, we're talking about the number of things you have to grade and the number of things you have to do. I teach the same kind of thing. I teach research methods, and I teach reading intensive courses as well. To have that can also then free up time for the faculty member to do research.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for though, because sometimes the mentoring of those students is a massive time suck too. But it can play off either way for sure. Teresa, do we have one?
So just have one comment that says, I so appreciate this emphasis on discussion and transparency. This is, in my mind, key.
You're right. So let me give you a for instance. The biology, I don't know how many people know about what the biology department did with their service. Anyone, you all know about this? So there was an NSF study that shock of all shocks suggested that women faculty do more service than male faculty. I know, shocking. And so they decided to test this. And because if they polled the faculty and everybody, the women faculty, surprising, not surprising, said women do more service than the male faculty said no. Then they did it. They did it in our biology. They all agreed to do this and be super transparent about it. And lo and behold, they found that there was a discrepancy. And what was really interesting about this study and what they did is that they made it all transparent. So it literally, they put together a whole spreadsheet, did all this shit. And then what happened was that the faculty in biology were like, I had no idea. I had no idea. And now they saw it staring right back at them that what was going on in terms of inequity. And so then the next move then is, all right, well then now let's be transparent and let's do these assignments and look at the labor and put it out here and do this. And I will tell you that everybody feels better about it now, everybody. So it wasn't a conspiracy of male biologists to go after women and make them do, they literally were not aware of it. They were aware of the concept, but didn't think it actually applied to them. And so the idea here is what fixed that was the transparency and putting it up and everybody seeing it and understanding that, and having that conversation that, look, serving on the curriculum committee is more labor intensive in general than, I don't know, serving on some provost advisory council or something, right? And so you have those discussions, they had those discussions. And so that's what has to happen here. And the hard thing is why that was successful, I think, in biology is they weren't defensive about it. It wasn't a let's attack people and expose this conspiracy, or they weren't defensive. And so again, urging everybody to think about this as these conversations happen, as the transparency happens, as this discussion comes in. If this process is used to go after each other, we're going to end this process and we'll just go to 4-4. We'll still be in R2, and it'll be one college. But we don't want to do that. We want to make this sort of available to everybody and make this as positive as we can. So going into these discussions with the spirit of collegiality and setting aside the concept that a course release means I'm better. Please do that. It will make it so much better for everybody. We don't want this to be painful.
5 o'clock, but we do have a little program honoring retirees as well. So one more question.
You'll be the final.
A very quick question. Is there equity between colleges on teaching load?
Well, there never has been. So that's the short answer. So remember that CBE, because of their accreditation, has always been a 3-3. And in Fisher, they're not so worried about this moving of that some people in some departments have different loads, because they've always had different loads. And so the way that they managed it over in Fisher, partly because of grant dollars, right? That because they do have a lot of grants over there, a lot more opportunity to do grants. So a lot of faculty could write in course release into their grants. And also the dean had indirect cost money where he could buy out people's time to reduce their load for research intensive. So somewhat of the dirty little secret of academia is we've always had difference now is we're going to have that discussion and make it transparent. So there's always been, it's always existed. And so it will change now.
And we'll be able to use grants to buy out courses and things like that. So
we do sure. Yeah, people already do. Yeah, so here's the fun thing about grant writing.
I've done it a lot.
Yeah, but some people, so there's been a practice of a lot of, I've seen these grants go through and it makes me crazy. When faculty do their course buyouts, they set it at $4,000. Like, don't do that at $4,000. Please do it that, I mean, it's like 18% or something of your salary. So you get that bigger things. Faculty members gonna get more money. The dean, way smarter way to do it. So remember, that's why we went to the 9-month contract, that you can now write in 3 months of your salary into a grant and get paid significant chunk of money in the summer you get one, and that's the sole reason we did that. And so, so that's something to think about as you're doing it.
Taking time out of a very busy schedule.
For Friday the 13th coming on out.
See, it worked. So far, it wasn't so bad.
That wasn't. It's just raining.
And
So I'm going to take my
oh yeah, okay.
my College of Liberal Arts umbrella,
Yes.
and which I was telling the dean, I was like, that's the best tchotchke I've gotten from any cop. We get all those plastic tumblers. And I'm like, I can't take another coffee tumbler, but I will take all umbrellas. So thanks for coming out, everybody. I know this is hard stuff. It really is, but I know we're going to get through it. I know it's going to be great. It's just going to take a little bumps in the road. And just, I am absolutely confident we will make mistakes, including me. 100% guarantee. We can guarantee I'm going to make mistakes here. But please understand that even and give each other that grace. I'll give you that. You give me that grace. That, you know, the mistakes that are made are coming from a good place. And then you just acknowledge it. The whole transparency thing. You say, nope, geez, I really thought that would work. And it didn't. And that's okay. Right. And so it's going to be a little bumpy, but going in the spirit of, you know, supporting each other. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be an awesome outcome for everybody. So that's the goal. That's the hope and expectation. All right, I got to get out of here so you can give away fancy stuff.
These are yours.
All right.
These are yours.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck on finals.
I know, yeah, it's next week.
I know.
Do you want to go this way?
Yeah.
So before I say my prepared remarks, if you see there on that front table, there are all kinds of, you know, booklets. They're programs from the honors events and award ceremonies that I've attended so far. There are a few more coming up. So if you have a chance afterwards, take a look, see what some of the other departments are doing and what the university is doing. Some of them are university level. They're not just department. So it really is it attests to the great work you're doing, right? Our students have talents, but you're helping them along and getting to the point where they're honored, usually at the end of their time here. Some of them are a little bit earlier. So I just want to say a few things in response to what we just heard, and then I have a very brief update, a couple of updates, and then we're going to honor retiring faculties, and then we have a reception afterwards. So I think we can do most of this by 3 o'clock. I will also take a couple of questions. So grant writing that the provost talked about. So, you know, I think I covered this already. There are a lot of opportunities for collaborative work, and some of it's already going on in this college. Some successful grants and some that are pending right now, some not so successful, but then they're rewrites. So if you attended one of my conversations with the dean this semester, you know that I asked faculty, some faculty who have grants right now or who are planning grants to talk about it. And so you know about their work, you know who they are, and I'd like more of that, and I think more will happen, but it does take time. One takeaway was that everyone on that panel who had received a grant had to resubmit a grant at least one time, right? That's common. What you don't want to do is write a grant, then get rejection. Most grants are rejected the first time, not all, and then say, okay, I'm not doing it again. That's really a lot of time then you aren't putting to good use, okay? So we can help you on that to some extent, and so can OSPR and maybe a few other places. As far as what you said, Joan, about creating a database, that's absolutely critical. I've asked, you know, OSPR since I arrived, we don't have one. This comes up periodically in different meetings I attend, and I think it's in part a resource concern issue, but the college has a graduate student who put together a really excellent study of the liberal arts, which we're going to work on over the summer, and we'll release part of it to the community at the end of the summer. It was just presented this week, so I hadn't seen it before. But what she did is she went through each department and each faculty profile and pulled together themes, research themes based on what's on the website. And we know they're not all up to date, but based on what's up there. And I thought that was really revealing. There are a lot of opportunities in those themes for collaborative work. Doesn't mean you have to, but there might be options for you. You might have several possibilities to collaborate with different people, different groups. And I think that's exciting, that you don't have to feel like you're limited to one, you know, set of people to work with. But as far as funding, I am meeting with I'm going to begin meeting regularly with foundation relations. These are people who sit in the, it's actually, I think only one person, Janine Callahan, who sits in the advancement office. So OSPR and the advancement office work together when it comes to external funding. I don't know what the division is, and I'm not sure there's a strict division of labor, but they both come to me when there are opportunities. The thing is, oftentimes we have no one working on the topic. So they'll say, oh, there's this great big idea and it doesn't fit our college at all. But often they need projects. It's not about individual grants, it's projects. So the more we know what we're doing and who's working together, the better off we are. But you're right, we don't have a database right now and we need to do something with that. New programs, anyone who's interested in that, just so you understand, the provost wasn't saying, you know, individual faculty should go right to graduate office or another office in the university. You can do that, but I would work within your department first, your chair, and then that usually comes to the dean's office and we move it on. And that's how it works, right? You can have any conversations you want, but we need to be aware of it because it has to go through a process and a structure. And there's a financial aspect to it. So I also have to make sure that the provost's office would agree to it and think it's a program that's necessary and viable in the future in our college. I really appreciate what Cecilia said about student struggles. And I know you've brought this up in committees and in other venues. What I'm thinking of doing is in the fall semester, because this conversation also came up in the last college council meeting, and I'm trying to remember what other meetings, but with the chairs. And so what I'm thinking of doing in the fall is opening up a Blackboard, maybe discussion page for people to post best practices. This only came up a few weeks ago. It was too late in the semester, but we spent a lot of time talking about how can we respond to students who are struggling and who, as you pointed out, really aren't, for many reasons, and Jennifer mentioned too, they're not where they should be right now. There were many good ideas, and it seemed to be very helpful to the people in the room. But now we need to broaden that out so that we can have an ongoing sort of list of what works and maybe even best practices. Transparency, I mean, I've talked about this all year. Transparency may mean different things to people, but generally speaking, it's important that processes are transparent. I'll give you an example that I've talked about all year, and we'll roll it out in the fall once I get the budget. We don't have our budgets yet. We were approved, as I've said many times this semester, for a significant increase in research support for next year. So I don't want to mention the number because it may not, be the number in the end, but I suspect it will. That means that my office will be able to support you for your conference travel at a much different level. But I'm going to introduce categories. And I don't have that set yet, so I'm not going to say what those categories are. But there is one thing that's concerned me since I came in. And I think this is common practice everywhere, not just at Towson or not just in the College of Liberal Arts. But, we have 2 cycles for research applications for faculty in the college. Often your need comes up right after the deadline or right after the announcements have been made. You need money before the next cycle. So people have come to me and said, hey, I have this book, and in order for me to get it published, I have to have editorial costs paid for, and it's $2,000, $4,000, $25,000. One case was $25,000. What can you do to help me? That's fine, but I want there to be a process that you can go to a link on the webpage and submit a request. Because right now, I think there are faculty who would never think of doing that. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. So the transparency part isn't that everyone sees all the applications, it's that anyone can go ahead and make that application. Now, until now, responded to individual requests, but I don't want to continue to do it. I know that's been a practice. I don't think that's fair going forward. So we'll see how that works. I don't anticipate a lot of requests, but we'll see. Again, if people have hesitated or didn't think of coming to me, I wouldn't even know how many requests might be out there. I want to now shift a little bit and just say a few things, what you know, we've accomplished a lot of things this year, but I just want to pause on a few of them. First of all, I don't think we can overstate how important it is that we made this year work. We came back in September and it was, you know, do you have the vaccine? If you don't have the vaccine, maybe you lose your job or you can't come back to work or you can't be a student. We're really way past that at this point. We did another round of that with boosting coming back this semester, but it was in my mind without any bumps. Last September, I had a list of 91 students who we would have disenrolled because they didn't tell us if they had the vaccine, they didn't ask for an exception, they just didn't respond at all. In the end, most of those students did what they were supposed to do. Most of them said, oh, I never saw the message, you know, after they'd gotten how many reminders. So we're way past that. Mask, no mask, we're not required to mask anymore, although we're feeling uncomfortable without the mask, many of us. But we've really come a long way. This has had a tremendous impact on our students. We're graduating, I believe, around 1,600 students in a couple of weeks. That's because you helped them get through. I know other people on campus are important. It's not just you, but you helped them get to the finish line. Why is that important? Because that'll take me to my next comment, enrollment. If we look at enrollment for the fall and we think particularly about retention, we're struggling. We're struggling with rising juniors and seniors. Last year, we weren't at this time. The numbers are down in the double digits. That's a real concern. We don't want them to drop out because most of the time, students who stop out don't come back. And so what does that mean for them? But enrollment is really important. So as much as you do for the students to make them successful, it really has a ripple effect in their lives. It is an enrollment, you know, fiscal issue here, but we're not here just for that, right? We're here to help the students through. We have a new VP for enrollment who is replacing Bob Giordani, who's retiring in a couple of weeks, and also having a few more responsibilities. So he set up one-to-one meetings with the deans. Mine is on Monday morning. I have a whole list of questions for him, but it's one meeting. There'll be other meetings. We can't do everything in one meeting, but I want to know what his thoughts are on those pressing issues of enrollment, retention, students who struggle, as Cecilia mentioned. And I should have mentioned in enrollment, our freshman numbers are great. That's important for the next 4 years. Great, meaning we will hit pre-COVID enrollment targets, and it looks like beyond. Where we're really suffering, I mean, the worst right now is transfer students because community colleges are down in such great numbers. And that's where most of our transfer student comes. We're not alone, but it impacts us too. Let's see, what else can I say we've done? We've had many conversations about transition to R2. Clearly that's going to continue and into next year. And we'll have different kinds of conversations. Maybe more structured among the chairs and then departments. And then we want to make sure that departments are really aware of what's going on, maybe get some good ideas from another department and avoid some pitfalls as well. In terms of events and activities, well, we're back, right? And if you paid attention or went to any of the events this semester, you know they're mostly well attended and there are many events. You can spend almost 3 nights a week, not now, you could spend every night in the week, but you could normally spend 2 to 3 nights a week going to one of our events. That's great. And I think that's another sign of us coming back and because, you know, leading to a more normal life. We should also note that a lot of our students are off campus, right? For community activities and presenting research. That's great too. Again, returning to normal life. All right, the last couple of things I'll say, and then we'll move on to the retirements. You've heard me talk about my initiatives, the Democracy Today project and commemorative moments. There are web links now. There's even a form to submit some ideas for the commemorative moments calendar. The calendar's up, so please take a look at it. Please think about how you organize your events for next academic year. Really, throughout the whole year. The calendar goes through the spring semester. And then think about if you're teaching on a topic related to one of those events that semester, think of how you might connect your teaching to one of those moments. They're not events, but moments. I want to finally say just point out a few successes in our college recently, and I'll put out a written full list of successes as far as I know, right? I depend on people to submit to me. You probably know we had 4 students receive a Fulbright for next year, going to Spain, Italy, and the UK, which is wonderful. Those are the only 4 received at the university. They're all in CLA. Again, you helped them get there. Even if you think, well, I didn't have anything to do with their topic, you probably had them in a core course. So you did help them. We have one faculty member, Fran Botkin, who received a Fulbright for Jamaica, to go to Jamaica. We have a new hire who received a Fulbright, so he hasn't even started yet, for Serbia later next year in history. And there are more people, but I am just taking a few highlights. So apologies to you, those of you I don't mention, but in history, Marcio Siwi recently was awarded an ACLS project development grant to continue his research on a book, which is great. And that follows up on an NEH grant he had before that. And as you heard the provost say tonight, Grub Street, which won again, another year in a row, the Gold Crown, which is the highest honor from the Columbia Scholastic Press Association. They're having, you could say, sort of a launch reading. They're gonna have other things going on at Ivy Bookstore, which is on Falls Road, but you can find it online. And that starts at 5:30 and goes to 7. So that's all great news. And there's much more, and you'll hear about it when I send out a message soon. I wanna pause now or end, I should say, with recognition of retirees first. Last year, we couldn't have a ceremony because we were all virtual. So retirees, the practice I was told is they receive a letter from the dean and they receive a memento. And so those had to go out by mail last year. And I wanna acknowledge those faculty members and which department they worked in. So first, Cynthia Cates in political science, Marion Cockey in sociology, anthropology and criminal justice, Gary Levy in psychology, Antoinette Marzato in political science, it's a big list. Paul Myers in English, John Morgan in geography, Marlana Portolano in English, and Virginia Thompson in geography. So this was last year's group who had to receive acknowledgement via mail, and we have to be appreciative of them and the unusual circumstances of last year. So this year's retirees is a smaller group, but together, if you add up all their years of service, it comes to 147 years, not quite 150. So this is really great. For purposes of time, I will include in a written communication a few highlights from their time here. But right now, what I want to do is at least acknowledge them. And those who are here, and I'm looking around the room, I think maybe I'm wrong, only one might be here. But in any case, if you're here, please come up so I can give you your bag here with the memento, and I believe it has a letter for me. I signed them all. I don't know if they got in there. So the first faculty member is Kent Barnes from geography, and he has been here for 32 years. And then Joella Anzelk, who is in, I want to say psychology. For some reason, those department names didn't get onto my list. She's been here for 25 years. And I've met almost everyone. There's only one I have not met on this list, and I've actually seen them doing something that they would normally do here, like give a lecture or whatever. Biani Brooks in psychology, 21 years. Barry Gitlin in religious studies, 13 years. Lee Ramsdell in foreign languages, or now languages, literatures, and cultures, 23 years. And James Roberts from political science, 33 years. So James, Jim, I'm so glad you came. I heard Jim give, I think you said, was it your valedictory? I don't know how you put it, lecture a couple of weeks ago. The room was, and it was, I was just entranced by his style, what he had to say, his use of technology, and even music videos. That's how I think of them. But videos of musicians I don't even know, rap,
course, jazz, classical music, the way Jim blended everything together seamlessly, almost as if the computer was moving to the next slide, moving to the next image on his own. It was really fascinating to see, and I wish I could have, seen more, and maybe I will. Maybe I'll see in the future more, but I want to congratulate you and wish you all the best. And this is a memento from the college.
Thank you very
for
much.
you to remember us by. And we would like you to remember us and come back, visit us, keep in touch. It's really important. So another thank you for.
The best part of teaching at Towson is always my colleagues. And so thank you to everyone for all the great.
Thank you so much.